On the last episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, he had an interesting theory about how Democrats could possibly win in 2020. Here's Bill.
I think this might be one of those years where it's the discussion Mike and I were having. It's that they can't get over that centrist versus socialist thing. So Elizabeth Warren at some point takes Bernie's voters, he drops out. It's Warren and Biden. And they go to the convention, and it's deadlocked. This has happened before in American politics, and they need a compromise candidate. I'm looking hard at Amy Klobuchar. You know why? Because, this is not an insult, Amy Klobuchar, I like you, but when they put generic Democrat on the ballot, they win.
And joining us now is the person from that clip with that very knowing smile, Krystal Ball.
That's funny.
What are your thoughts about Bill's strategy there?
I think my face pretty much said it all there, but Bill is very well intentioned. I think he really just is so nervous about the idea of Democrats have to beat Trump that he is buying into the narrative that's very ambient in our culture, that you have to run a centrist to win. And he thinks if you just have like the most sort of plain vanilla candidate on the ballot, that's the best way to do it. And look, obviously, I completely disagree with that. I think the reason that Democrats have lost is because they haven't stood for anything, right? So voters think that they're full of it. We ran a centrist last time, I might remind you, and Hillary Clinton. It didn't go so well. So, I don't think that's the right approach. I think you want a candidate who's authentic, who says what they think, who stands up for something and is ready to fight for the American people. And that resonates. It's not about exactly where you are on the ideological spectrum. It's about who people think is going to be a fighter for them, bottom line.
Yeah. Look, I sort of get that narrative is out there and that he appears to be a believer in that. I don't know exactly why his thought is then Amy Klobuchar. That's who we go to first. But where I'm coming from is, what if hypothetically we had some evidence with which to choose a candidate? What if we had numbers, like a poll maybe, about who is generating enthusiasm inside of the Democratic electorate right now? What if we had some polls about how these different candidates matched up against Trump in states across the country, maybe even in Texas, states that aren't normally in play? What if we had that sort of evidence and then chose the strongest candidate based on who is already doing extremely well against Donald Trump? What do you think about that?
It's interesting you should mention that, because we do have quite a lot of polls that show Bernie Sanders doing very well against Donald Trump, which completely blows up this whole narrative that you have to run a centrist. I mean, look, the polls also say that Biden does well against Trump. Those are the two candidates who poll the best today against Trump. Now, a lot of things can change between now and Election Day, but I also think it's important to look beyond this question of who's most electable, which is a very debatable proposition, and look at, we have to do more than just defeat Trump. What is more powerful to me and scarier than Trump is the movement that brought him to power, this right-wing Trumpist movement that brought him to power, that we see on the rise around the world. And in order to deal with that, you not only have to get rid of Trump, you actually have to deliver some real tangible benefits for the working class. Which candidate do you think is best suited and has the best theory of change in order to actually deliver for the multiracial working class? In my estimation, Amy Klobuchar and Joe Biden are probably not the ones who are going to bring the real change and fundamentally shift the dynamics in this country that you need to.
I largely agree with that as well. So I'm curious, as you point out right now, in most polls at least, directly matching up the candidate against Donald Trump, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders do the best. Of course, a lot can change in a year. If it does end up being Joe Biden, and he is after all the front runner, how nervous are you about the way that general election could develop? How nervous are you thinking about the election day coming up next year?
Terrified, frankly, terrified. I mean, if you just look at this past debate performance, and I know the pundits judged Biden on this tremendous curve, but I read back the transcript. He was so far below what any of the other candidates on the stage were able to do, just in terms of articulating a vision, articulating his thoughts on any particular question. The idea of him on the stage with Donald Trump going head to head, it's terrifying. I find it very, very troubling. And I hope that when people are evaluating this race, as they watch the next debate, as they watch candidates making appearances on the trail and on television and interviews, I hope they really think hard about who is up to the task of taking on Donald Trump, who's a tremendous threat to our future of the planet.
Yeah, if they did end up on the stage together, I don't know who we'd have. Would we have Joe Biden of the last year or two, who's sort of fumbling in his thoughts, or would we have the strong, virile Joe Biden that stood up to corn pop low so many years ago? I honestly don't know. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.